Okie dokie. So, let's waste no more time. So,
Okay.
hello everybody. Welcome to another episode of Chatter. Today, I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Jose Vega, who is an activist and man who came across my desk after he crashed an event with editors of the New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, and Reuters to complain about their absolutely horrendous coverage of many of the biggest stories over the past few years. So, yeah, man, welcome to the show. Thanks very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. It's an absolute pleasure. So yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the video for people, and I'm just going to share my screen so that you can see it too.
About that with some leaks? Go ahead. It's a free speech event, right? You guys are the press. Let's say something here. Mr. Kahn, come on. You're the executive editor of the New York Times, I'm just trying to get into some good trouble here, man. Woo, listen, Karen, get out of my face for a second. I got to talk to these gentlemen. Okay. Well, I just want to hear what they have to say. Go ahead, I'm done.
Wait your turn. Wait your turn.
You're not going to tell them to you. Come.
Wait your turn.
You could project if we
I
can't.
would just say I think it's important to hear everybody's point of view.
Yeah.
So thank you.
All right.
I do think that we need to give our moderator a chance to ask other questions.
We're on the verge of World War
Some
III.
of the people in the audience also do so. Thank
Let's
you.
go.
Really, thank you.
Say something about this bombing. We blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. Listen, don't stand there while there are people rotting in prison. Nobody said anything about Uhuru, right? The socialists who are in jail for being critical of this war. God damn it.
Okay, well, that gives people, that'll give people a good enough taster of what you're all about. So, yeah. So I think then my first question is, what made you decide to confront these people?
I think it's just been the overall utter failure to actually accurately report what's going on, but also just being stenographers for the deep state and the government at this point. They don't present anything that's actually challenging the narrative. They don't present anything that is actually daring to ever speak out against the empire. And the biggest example of that you see is that Seymour Hersh's piece on the fact that we blew up the Nord Stream pipeline was not covered in mainstream media. Only on Fox News, of all places, was it actually covered in. So it's a big problem that you don't have a media that people can actually trust anymore. And so now it's relying on people to be independent journalists. And so me going there and deciding to stand up to them was, well, basically me announcing the fact that they've already died, in the sense that nobody cares what they have to say anymore. And it's becoming evident that they are getting everything wrong, and that it's becoming obvious how complicit they are to aiding the narrative of whatever the government wants there to be put out.
Yeah, it's really, really, really. Do you think they think that they are doing good things? Like, do you think that they think they're doing quality journalism?
No, I think they know that they're, well, maybe not the lower level people, like the people who might be in the managerial class, or maybe even the people who are just like the editors, or not the editors, but like the writers themselves, right? Maybe they think, at least some of these lower level people think, like, oh, well, I have these high level contacts, because when they always have like an unnamed source, that's just some CIA agent or some FBI agent or whatever, right? And so the lower level people might be thinking, wow, look, it's pretty cool. I have somebody give me insider information and I can't tell them what to say or do. But the upper level people are very complicit in knowing that what they're being told is just straight up lies, and just being told what that they just need to say whatever the narrative is.
Yeah, like, do you think the narrative? Where do you think the narrative comes from primarily? Like, is it because there's like a couple of possible sources? Like, it could be like direct government influence. Oh, you've got a cat. Lovely. What's her name?
His name's Ozymandias.
Ozymandias, love it. Oh, there is a cat somewhere in this flat, but I don't know if he's going to join us. So like it could be things being handed down from like directly from like, you know, Democrat insiders or Republican insiders or people, you know, directly working in the White House, or it could be pressure from advertisers, whether that's like big tech or whether that's, say, like big financial firms who maybe make a lot of investment in or people just big financial firms with, you know, money and money invested in some of these institutions, or people like Jeff Bezos owning the Washington Post, or it could be like Operation Mockingbird style, like intelligence agency influence, or it could just be groupthink. So like, what is your sense that is like the primary driver of the fact that they're so divorced from reality?
Well, everything you have to realize that they're putting out there and are talking about is that they're trying to keep people in a matrix, and the place it's coming from is the apparatus and this, what people call the military industrial complex, but what, you know, former CIA agent Ray McGovern calls the Mickey Mat. Right? It's the media, institutes, think tanks, the military a component of it. I mean, he says it's the, in the media, of course, he says it all plays a big role. After 2008, when Obama expanded, 2009, Obama had expanded the Patriot Act to make it legal again for the United States to propagandize its own country. So before, it was legal for the United States to propagandize other countries, which is where you get Radio Free Asia from, Radio Free Europe from. Anything that has Radio Free is United States government funded propaganda. And that stuff was legal. And so now it's legal to do it here in the United States ever since Obama expanded the Patriot Act. And ever since, but even before then, you had Operation Mockingbird. You had the former CIA chief, I forget which one, I think it was Colby, who said, you know, we'll know we're successful when the American public believes whatever the hell we want them to believe. So you have it's not really I mean, people like to say it's like a shadow government. It's not necessarily so shadow. It's actually it's not a shadow. It's actually shallow. You know, when you actually start like naming names of people who it actually is, it's not anyone actually in our own government. I mean, you have to look at stuff like the Transatlantic Council. You start looking at things like, you know, the British influence and role that they have in the United States. The media is just one key player, but it's not the biggest player. It's coming from, you know, places like, you know, the British and the United States, the Defense Department, right? It's a whole big agenda that they just decide to disseminate around their media. So that's where it's all coming from. It goes beyond just corporate lobbyists. I mean, yes, that is a problem. Yes, that is a thing. And they pretty much own all of our Congress. But, you know, most of the Congress members today don't make any laws. They don't know what the hell they're mostly voting on most of the time. They're just told what to vote on, and then they do.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned the CIA. The public believing whatever they would like the public to believe. Because the thing that's interesting me a lot in America right now is what's going to happen in the Democratic primary. And one of the most interesting things about it is watching Robert F. Kennedy Jr. just come straight out and be like, yeah, no, the CIA killed my dad. Or my uncle, I think. Sorry, I'm not sure if he said definitely his dad, but his uncle.
He did say his uncle.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I believe that the people who killed his dad were the same people who killed his uncle. You know, it was all part of the same apparatus. I mean, you know, Bobby Kennedy, not RFK Jr., but his father. I mean, the original plan, at least from what I've read, was that JFK was going to be president for 8 years, and then Bobby Kennedy was going to be president for another 8 years. So kind of starting a Kennedy dynasty there. That was their ultimate goal. And And then when Bobby Kennedy in 68 announces he's going to run for president, 2 months later, he's shot and killed. I mean, that sends a very clear message that the same people who killed JFK wanted to kill his father also. Wanted to kill Bobby Kennedy. So the Kennedys have a curse where they're just killed. And actually what RFK Jr. said, that he remembers his father getting on the phone saying, did our guys do this, provides a lot more context as to who really was responsible for Bobby Kennedy's death and Bobby Kennedy's assassination. It was the same people that actually did it. And in terms of like the Democratic primary and stuff, I mean, things are definitely getting spicy because of what RFK Jr. is saying. But I think the important thing to kind of realize is to take it out of the two-party system, take it out of the Democratic Party. They're not going to let anybody win in the DNC that they don't want to win. There's a podcaster named Savvy Sabs who had on some election lawyers where they proved that the Democratic Party is a private entity, right? So if they wanted to, they really could just say, no. We are going to go with whoever we want at the end of the day, on top of the fact they have like a super delegate system. So in the primaries, like all the super delegates can go to whoever the hell, they tell them to go to. So you don't have a fair system of elections here in the United States. And so I think it's a tragedy that RFK Jr., who, I like him as a person, but I don't trust the party. And I don't agree with everything he says, but what he has been saying about, the CIA killing his uncle is definitely a big deal. I just think that people need to kind of let go of the two-party system altogether, or else it's going to be what kills us. Maybe RFK could punch the primary. I don't know. I mean, one poll I saw said that he was rivaling Biden in the polls, and another one says he's like, yeah, it was done by this group called Rasmussen.
Yeah.
And Rasmussen polling is very, I don't know, they have like a right-wing bent, but they included, it was something like RFK was at 36% and Biden was at 35%. And then something like 16% of people wanted Marianne Williamson and the rest weren't sure or don't know. Then another poll came out saying, no, actually, RFK Jr. is at 11%, but that one was done by like a heavily DNC funded survey. So I don't really know. You really don't know. It's maybe they're just trying to fit in the propaganda, but it's still very early. And also the fact that the DNC has said there will be no debates is absolutely absurd because they don't want to expose the fact that Biden doesn't know what the hell he's talking about most of the time.
Yeah. So there's definitely no debates. Like they're just not going to do it.
That might change if people make enough rackets about it, but right now it's the case that there will be no debates.
Wow. Yeah, Democrat. Yeah. Marianne Williamson was complaining. Yeah, and I also wanted to say, there was that podcast you were talking about. I just wanted to pull up for people here. They argued, the Democratic National Committee argued in court, basically, that they don't owe anyone a fair primary process, which is, I mean, we didn't think they really did, but I mean, yeah. And my hope or my suspicion, honestly, is that RFK will not win the primary within the Democratic Party. And what will happen is, I think he probably knows that as well, unless he's really thinking he can pull it out the bag, right? I think what's going to happen is he will use the primary as a springboard to run an independent campaign. That's what I would suspect will happen, because he's not talking just to, like, he's talking to some of the faction that like Bernie Sanders might have appealed to, but he's also talking to a lot of different independent and even like Republican leaning people. Like he's at the Bitcoin conference right now. Like that's just there's not a lot of Democrats at the Bitcoin conference, right? And he's speaking there and he's like being like, look, I believe in your right to, have a node, have your own wallet, not have it taxed. That's your money. So he's courting like a really interesting coalition of people, and it suggests to me that he's not thinking solely about the Democratic primary at the minute.
Yeah, I saw that the Libertarians really like him too,
Mm-hmm.
and I've heard rumors that they might want to put him on their line so they can keep their party status in certain states. Because here in the states, if you want to be a party, you need to have a candidate who, and it's different in every state. I know here in New York, who will be polling or get at least 2% of the votes. So obviously, RFK Jr. will get at least 2% of the votes in a primary here, and in the general. So I think that's, I mean, you're right. He is trying to go for this coalition of people. I, again, do not trust the party. And also, I think there's people who think, like, and I might be wrong about this, but I've heard, Brianna Greyjoy talk about how it's a good thing that other people are challenging Biden, like Marianne Williamson or RFK Jr., because it might influence Biden to do some policies or push him to the left, and maybe I'm misrepresenting her view, and if so, I apologize for that. But this is what I thought I heard, and my reaction to that was like, well, it's not that Biden is now going to say, "Oh, I'm getting, I'm getting somebody's going to challenge me. Now I'm going to go and do some of the promises I said I was going to do." It's okay. How do we play dirtier? How do we get them out of the primary altogether? How do we make sure that they don't win? It's not going to change any kind of policy. I mean, if it was an honest system, maybe, but it's just going to make them play even dirtier.
Yeah, that is a concern of mine, if I'm honest. But well, I guess we'll see what happens. Really, I mean, I am skeptical that Joe Biden will make it to the end of the primary thing. I can't see him getting through it. Like, I think they'll get him to withdraw on medical grounds, because like they'll say, oh, he's, something's happened and things have got much worse for him health wise, and they'll be forced to pull out, and I don't know who they put in instead. I mean, my suspicions would be they will try to put Pete Buttigieg in for some reason, and no one will like him. They will try and put Gavin Williamson in, or sorry, not Gavin Williamson, Gavin Newsom.
Newsom.
Yeah. Then I think maybe what's his name, the billionaire Bloomberg. He might give it a shot, and I'm thinking left field out of the blue might be a Michelle Obama run. Those would be my suspicions for who could possibly.
You see, that would make even in a sick, twisted society, that would make sense. But we're beyond a sick, twisted society. I don't know if you saw these pictures of Dianne Feinstein being wheelchaired into the Senate at like 89 years old, and one of her eyes is closed, and then she's like being interviewed, and then they say, yeah, so what was it like being away for 2 weeks? What was the reaction from your colleagues being away for 2 weeks? And then she says, what are you talking about? I've been here the whole time. And then they're like, she's like, I've been working the whole time. And then they're like, oh, you mean like working from home? No, I've been here. I've been voting. If you don't know, then you don't know. And then like her aide had to come away and wheelchair her away. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous that you have and like no hate to John Fetterman at all. Like, hey, he needed some mental health help. He needed, and he got the help he needed. But what we see in the Democratic Party is people who are so desperate. And it probably isn't even Dianne Feinstein. It probably is not her who's making that decision to stay in there, although it's probably painted that way. They need her in there because they probably need her vote. That's all it is, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure this lady can't even tell where she is half the time. So they just kind of like, it's like a weekend at Bernie's situation where they're just like, okay, Auntie Diane, just put your thumb up for yes, please, or put thumb down for a no, okay? And that's all it is at this point. I don't think she has the mental capacity to really figure out or even read what kind of bill she's voting on. She's probably just being told, or her office, I should say, is being told what she needs to vote on and vote on party lines.
Yeah, it's absolutely absurd to me, because like it kind of happens here in the United Kingdom, but not in the same way. Like, we have some old politicians, right? like we had Dennis Skinner was a fantastic Labour MP. Was, you know, I think he was like 80 something when he finally retired. I'm gonna have to look that up. But like he's an outlier. There's very few. Served 49 years from 1970 to 2019, and he was born in 32, so that would have made him, quick maths, 91 he is now, so he would have been in Parliament till he was 87. Okay, so we're talking Dianne Feinstein age, to be quite honest, but he was still sharp as a tack, right? And he was the outlier, right?
That's not, no, that it makes sense to me. And I mean, if you're thinking about posterity in the future, hopefully you'll have a system where people can actually live longer, look younger, and still be mentally sharp, right? You know, people's lifespans far in the future. I mean, I hope it's soon. I mean, I don't want to die, but like, you know, hopefully people's lifespans will be increased indefinitely, or at least, you know, within the next, I mean, scientists have said the first person who's going to live to be 150 years old is already alive, right?
150,
and, you know, there's going to be people who, and scientists who are going to discover something that will slow our aging process down. So, you know, maybe in the future, it won't be as shocking to say we have a 120-year-old senator and they only look like, you know, they're like 40 or 50 years old and their mind is still there. I mean, it's a very exciting prospect of anything.
Yeah.
Actually, so, you know, in the grand scheme of things, I have no problem with people who are old, because that term is going to get redefined as we go on in the future. But if we're thinking in contemporary sense, yeah, man, a 90-year-old person who can't even walk or think or doesn't even remember what they had for breakfast 30 seconds ago should not be in the office. You know, it's like a King Lear situation.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, like,
it's great.
Theoretically, you could say, right, that they are one of the 540 most. They're one of the 540 people who have their fingers on, like, or their hands on the levers of power in the most powerful country on the planet. It makes it seem like they should have their shit together in their head, at least.
Well, it tells you like what's happened to the population. That's what's more telling about it. You know, here in the United States, there's debates about term limits. Should we have term limits? You know. And in one sense, I understand the argument, because somebody like Nancy Pelosi should have been out of office for a long time ago.
Yeah.
My usual response is you do have term limits. It's called elections. You know, it's like you have the power to determine whether or not that person should even be there anymore or not. So it goes to tell you, like, a lot of the problem isn't, yes, it's the people in power. Yes, it's the people who have the authority. But it's also the population who has chosen to just let the country run amok the way it has. And, you know, we have let it get to this point because we kind of just like let go of everything and just said, fuck it. You know what? We're just not going to hold our government responsible anymore.
Yeah.
And part of that is because of what happened in the 60s. I mean, you had assassinations after assassinations after assassinations that really rocked the nation. Okay, you had Patrice Lumumba, 61, Dag Hammarskjöld, also 61. And I know there's some speculation as to whether or not he was actually assassinated. I do believe he was. And it was all related to Congo, so it had to be that. Then you had Kennedy, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., then you had Bobby Kennedy. There was that guy from the Black Panthers who was also shot and killed, whose name I forget. And then you had a whole bunch of African leaders getting assassinated. What you had was a paralyzed nation after the 60s that was just like, what the hell? Anybody who's challenging power in any way is getting their crosshairs set. And then you also had like the baby boomer, like, you know, hippie dippy love, you know, pacify everybody movement that really fucked up the entire state of mind of the United States and of the world, really, of like the Western world too, because I'm sure it happened in the UK also.
Yeah, don't hit on the
France
hippies too much, man.
too.
I'm a secret hippie. Look.
My point is, though, that like it seemed as if people just did not care anymore about government or politics, and we're just like, we're just gonna live off the land, man, and we're just gonna, do our own thing and not, care about government anymore. And then all those hippies grew up to be Republicans who were like Reaganites, and now they're all a mess.
Yeah. Yeah, they really went from free love to let's destroy the economy very quickly, didn't they? When you put it like that, yeah, they all became, the boomers that we're looking at now. Well, I guess they weren't all hippies, or not many of them would probably admit to it. But
Yeah.
so like, yeah, but it I'm not sure if you can 100% blame all the people, because it's like, it almost has to get to a point where things get too bad, where enough people are like, right, okay, enough of this shit. And I think at the minute we're in a cycle of testing how bad that we're gonna find out where that line is at some point in the next 5 to 10 years, unless something drastic changes. But it's like, right, look at the last two elections in America. You've got 2016. Okay, people tried to vote for Bernie, something different, something that wasn't just the corporate oligarchy again, right? And
yeah, I was a Bernie bro.
yeah, I mean, I hate that term, man. It's like, I liked his policies. I thought he was a guy who actually cared. Like, I don't have to be a fucking bro. And there's a lot of people who weren't bros. Who, it was such a stupid term that people fucking... Why do they have to, like, name everyone? Why can't they just be fans of someone? Anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, also a Bernie pro. But
he was actually the first person I voted for in a primary. I wasn't 18 yet, but New York has a thing where if you're going to be 18 before the year is up, you can vote. So 17-year-olds can vote. So I gave him my first vote as a Democratic primary guy.
Oh, that's cool. But yeah, like he was, and we had a similar movement in the UK with Jeremy Corbyn. It was like an old school, like left wing, but like not completely crazy politician who just seemed to care about people and had stuck by his principles for 4 years, and both of them sort of simultaneously came so close and didn't quite get over the line. But yeah, so in 2016, first, yeah, the attempt to have something not the corporate oligarchy, Bernie gets screwed because the DNC, right? And that the coverage isn't good. Like, people really don't understand what happened. They just think he lost because he lost, right? And there might be an element to that, but ultimately, I think he was kind of screwed out of it. And with a fair and open thing, he would have won.
The WikiLeaks showed that he was, done dirty, that the DNC and Hillary Clinton conspired against his campaign. But that's the kind of the thing I'm getting at, is that like people only go for what's presented to them, like shadows in a cave. Like, that's the Matrix, right? Even if Bernie Sanders looked like a good candidate, I mean, he then would bend over and then endorse Hillary Clinton and then do it again in 2020, endorsing Biden. And then he never raised a ruckus about the fact that the DNC conspired against his campaign. I mean, it was just completely terrible that he never said a mumbling word about it. And so I lost a little bit of respect for him. I would say, though, that like, I think James Bevel, who was a civil rights leader who worked closely with my organization, the Schiller Institute, would often say that people are responsible for 51% of their oppression. Because if you know you're being oppressed, if you know you're being done an injustice, you have a responsibility to fight against it. And if you just sit down and take it, well, then it is on you. And so the first step is to actually stand up and then decide, I'm not going to be oppressed anymore. And then you get rid of 51% of the oppression there. Then the rest of the fight is actually trying to free others. Because as he put it, freedom is the ability to make other people free. And so that's what I live by too. And so that's why I don't believe in the corporate duopoly anymore, because I don't think that I need to be limited by what is presented to me as options. I used to do this. I mean, I voted for Trump twice because he was the anti-establishment candidate, right? And so that was all that was presented to me. Like, well, he's not Hillary Clinton, right?
Yeah.
Well, he's not Joe Biden.
Yeah.
So I was thinking like, well, that's the anti. But now I don't vote for who I think is more likely to win and needs to win, right? Like, if I was still thinking in the same mindset I had 3 years ago, I would be a big RFK guy right now.
Yeah.
I'd be saying like, and I like RFK, don't get me wrong, but I would be thinking like, well, out of all the options, I think RFK Jr. is the best option we have, so I need to go and vote for him. I'm going to vote for who I think should be in office, not who I think maybe could. No, that's just how I will, and if that means voting for some nobody whose name nobody knows, but declared they're running, that's what I'm going to do, and so, and I might even campaign for them or something. So I don't know. The whole other thing too is I believe that there's a power of citizenry that, as you saw exemplified in that intervention and the others, I don't know if you've seen any of the other videos that I've done.
Yeah. No, I have.
Right. So it goes, way, way back. I mean, I confronted Kamala Harris in 2021, and then Kirsten Gillibrand, Jamal Bowman, AOC, Mike Pompeo.
I love that.
The AOC one?
Yeah, it was fucking brilliant. Because do you know why?
Yeah.
Because there was like a brief, I couldn't tell you exactly how long it was, but a moment where I thought that she could actually do something. Like early when she first got elected, there was a period in which I was like, do you know what? Like, and
she might be the Claire Daly of the U.S.
Just someone that come in and just, actually stand up for like regular people and like, do the things that people are always pressuring the Democratic, like the left wingers in the party to do is, like withhold your vote for speaker, like, push them for a fucking vote on the issues that you campaigned your entire fucking 3 years up to re-election on. Like, call them out on it. And she just sort of got rolled up into the corporate machine. And it was beautiful to watch someone like just point that out to her and just see her like have no idea what to say.
Well, see, that's exactly right, because I thought the same thing too. And when she won her primary, I was going through something here in the Bronx where my apartment, the ceiling, not this apartment, this apartment's been great so far, but I lived in like a very poor part of the Bronx where I still live in a poor part of the Bronx, but an even poorer part of the Bronx where I was living in a basement apartment. So what was happening was on my ceiling, there was some issue with the plumbing where the pipes had broken. And so all of this sewage water was pooling on the top of my ceiling. The smell was horrible. And then it was just bubbling. And then it all just, boom, popped. So I got the local media. I went to my assemblyman's office. I got a lawyer pro bono. Turns out there was black mold in the apartment. And he said, like, this is looking like a 7-figure settlement, right? Because when you have black mold, right? My assemblyman told me, because I was going to him and I was saying, like, listen, I'm going through this. And he was helpful at first because he got like housing inspection to come in and check it out. There was a day where he told me, listen, like, I see you're picking up a lot of steam. What if somebody came up to you with $15,000 just for you to let all this go and drop it? And I swear to God, he said this. I have this on tape somewhere. I've been looking for this because but he said like, it was his chief of staff who told me this. It wasn't my assemblyman or my councilman. My councilman's name was Fernando Cabrera, but his chief of staff name was Gregory Faulkner. He told me, what if somebody came to you with $15,000 to just let all this go? And I said, $15,000 isn't even enough to move out. And I told him, if somebody came to me with $999 million, then maybe I would consider it, but nothing less than that. He says, all right, don't be ridiculous, man. You could use the money and, I don't know, go back to school. Because I had taken off school to deal with this. And so mysteriously, that same night, he calls my mom and says, listen, your name's on the lease, not your son's. If you go through with this lawsuit, you will never be able to rent an apartment in New York City again because your name's going to be on the list. And no owner, no landlord wants to deal with somebody who sues landlords. So mysteriously, the day after that call, the locks are changed on the apartment, which is illegal. They legally cannot change the locks unless they give you a 2-week notice. I call the police at the lawyer, and then the police say, well, your mom has to come because her name's on the lease. My mother says, no. Okay, the councilman called me and told me, no, we're not fighting this. Drop it. And so there I am just crying on a sidewalk. And the landlord, we have what we call superintendent, is just like, throwing dirt on my name, saying, yeah, that kid's just squatting here. They've been moved out of here for months now. He's lying. And I had the media there a week ago. Okay, anyway. And so I'm there. I'm just completely defeated and crying. And so I write an email to AOC's team, because she had just won her primary. And I said, listen, I need the help. I never heard back from her team, but I even then I didn't hold it against her because I was like, okay, maybe she just won, getting her office set up, she's got 1,000 things, right? And that is still something that affects me to this day. There's going to be a documentary of me coming out sometime in the summer.
Oh, wow,
that my
really?
friends over at Do Dissidents. Yeah, Do Dissidents. They're a YouTube podcast group, and it turns out Keaton used to be a filmmaker, so he chose me as his first subject for a film. And
what's it called?
So I talk about it more.
Do Dissidents.
Yeah, on Twitter. Yeah, you'll find them on Twitter and on YouTube. Also, they just hit 10,000 subscribers. They're really good guys.
Do Dissidents.
Yeah, so they'll be coming out with and then if you go scroll on their Twitter, you can see clips of the background when they were interviewing me and stuff. But to make a long story short, so the effect of that, I was still even then believing in AOC because I thought maybe she'll enact this change. But then she voted to send money to Ukrainian Nazis. Then she was voting to make Nancy Pelosi Speaker of the House. She said she wasn't going to force the vote. And then all of a sudden she just got washed into it. And so what I tell people about that intervention is that when Kynan and I stood up, it wasn't that she saw us. She saw the ghost of her former self. She saw herself with that same fiery passion and spirit who thought, I'm going to go into Congress and I'm going to change things. I'm going to be a radical. And so it was her conscience that she thought she had killed off speaking to her. And that's the thing. You can't really kill your conscience because it is always there nagging in the back of your mind. And so what we did was we successfully, and the reason I know this is because she initially tried to dismiss it as Kynan speaking over a deaf constituent, which was just not true. There was no deaf constituent present there. She was reading an email talking about how do we make politics more accessible for people with disabilities. And then Kynan stood up. But then it took her 4 days after the video blew up the way it did, went viral the way it did, that she had to put out another statement, a huge statement saying that we're Trump supporters and that we're right wingers and that we're a part of a cult and that nobody should listen to what we're saying or take seriously. And I was it really messed with her that bad that she had to put out another statement. You know why she had to call us that? Because it's the only way to rectify in her mind that we're not right. That what we said was right. She knows what we said was right. But if she could, in her own mind, discredit our background from it, then maybe that makes it all the less true, which it does not. And so, I believe it really messed with her conscience. And, that is something that to this day, people think I hate AOC or something. I don't. And people think I want her to be out of office. Actually, no, I don't. Because I do think there is that woman in there who had that passion and spirit, who, when she joined the Democratic Party and became a congresswoman, because remember, she got rid of a top establishment Democrat, Joe Crowley.
Yeah, I was going to say.
That when that
Yeah, she primaried him, right? Yeah, she got the 10,000 signatures or whatever.
Yeah, she got rid of the guy. So, you know, because she got rid of the guy, she was not persona. She was persona non grata. They had to indoctrinate her in, or else they were going to have to get rid of her somehow. So, what happened? She had to make moral concessions. She said, "You know what? Like, if I want to pass the Green New Deal or get Medicare for all, I have to play the game." And so they promised her, "Oh, well, no, we'll do what you want. Just you have to play with us a little bit." And over time, that builds and builds and builds to the point where you really have to make a decision in your mind: is this right? Because remember, this was the same woman who was talking about being a one-term congresswoman. Oh, I'm okay with being a one-term congresswoman if it means enacting real change. Yeah, right. What have you done in one term? Nothing. You've just done the bidding of the military-industrial complex. You've been a completely useful idiot. Now, I'm not going to discount what?
She's on her 5th term now, right? 5th? No, wait. Yeah, 5th.
No, I think no. She won in 2018. So 1, 2,
Okay.
3, third term. You know, so she's just been a useful idiot, and I don't want to discount the work she's done for her district, though. I mean, she's done some things that don't really matter at the end of the day because she's done like food drives, she's done this tutoring gig, she's attended protests and marches and stuff, unions. An infinite amount of small good actions means nothing in a society and a culture that waves and washes in just evil Malthusian practices, right? If you have food drives, if you look, I live in a neighborhood where there are lines wrapped around blocks for people who are going to the food pantries because they're too poor. And then you have people like Richie Torres and AOC who say this is a success because we're giving food to our communities. Why do people have to line up for food in the beginning? Like, that's a moral failure, you know? To say that there are more people now who rely on food stamps and SNAP for their income. Oh, it's a great thing. Our program was working. No, it's not. It shows that your country is failing, that people need, these social safety benefits just to live. Like, in hindsight, yeah, they are a good thing because otherwise people would be starving. But it's like, well, why do people need to be on them to begin with? You know, why do you have a country where people can't sustain themselves anymore? So, you know, all these people postulate and posture on Twitter, but don't actually do anything.
Yeah. And like I can hear some of the right wingers in my head whenever I talk about like things like that. You've mentioned like food banks and stuff, and they're like, oh well, you know, the kids of this generation, you know, they don't know how to work, or they don't want to work, or people are lazy these days. And I always think it's just like, look, but like, I don't believe that people are fundamentally that different to the way they were over most of, probably the entirety of human history. I don't think people have changed that much. I think that what gets to what you're saying here is that there is like a rot in the institutions, and that's like seeping out and poisoning the whole of society. While people at the top, like, you know, wave flags and pretend to be, you know, making things better, and the rest of it's just crumbling. You know, it's like they're painting the outside of this like castle that's falling apart, and like inside the foundations are rotten, and they're like, oh look, it's beautiful. Yeah. Like
exactly. And so, look, dude, for total transparency, like when I was a teenager, my mom was working 2 jobs, and we were still going to the food pantry, and we still had benefits. Why was one job not enough for her to sustain an apartment and me? And why was 2 jobs not enough for her to sustain an apartment and me and not need SNAP benefits and also going to a food pantry? It's New York City is its own thing. And so when Marjorie Taylor Greene came to New York and she called it a shithole, and then Mayor Eric Adams and Jamal Bowman and AOC, and especially Bowman's like, no, man, New York City's great, man. You know, you just can't. No, it's not. Okay, as somebody who lives here and who loves this place, I love New York. I know what a shithole it is. You know, it's like I'll give you one story before I have to go. Mm-hmm. When I was petitioning for Diane Sayre to run as a Senate candidate in New York, we needed 45,000 signatures just to get her on the ballot. But that really meant we needed like 80,000 because here in the United States, they have this process called challenge, where if you get 45,000 exactly, the opposing camp has a right to look at your signatures. And if they say, oh, we can't read that one, so that doesn't count, you're off the ballot. So you need at least double, right? You have to assume that 50% of your signatures will just be knocked off. I was in Harlem, 125th Street in Lenox. And that's a very notorious place because you have underage drug dealers. Okay, you have teenage kids selling drugs on the corners and then the cops on another corner. Just straight up, it's just how they do it. And so one day I'm there, I'm getting signatures from people because you needed like a certain like 1,500 signatures in every district. So I'm getting them for Harlem. And in front of me, I see, this isn't atypical. You see this all the time in Harlem. Some guy just slumped over. So think of a guy standing upright and then his whole body's just folded over. That's just from the drugs, whatever the fuck the guy was doing. So he's just there, folded over me. And then I see an older guy next to me, and he's recording him like this. Okay, maybe the guy's like in his early 50s. And so I'm watching this, and then the guy comes up to me and is like, excuse me, I want to send this video to my son. Can you help me do that? And I say, okay, sure, no problem. So, I say, okay, you just got to hit send to, and then pick son's name. He's like, great. He says, thank you. The person I just sent this to is his younger brother. So I want his younger brother to see what his older brother has gotten into, because I don't want my younger son to be like my older son. And then he took his son, he like tried to lift him up and he's like, come on, son. But he was like almost dragging him on the sidewalk because he was just so high out of his mind. But the dad is like fighting to keep his son's dignity alive and trying to, get him to stay upright. I couldn't petition for the rest of the day. I just sat down and I cried because of like how terrible it was. And that's happening so much to so many people here in New York City. And when I get told, don't focus on government, don't focus on politics, just focus on your family, focus on protecting yourself. That's what Republicans say, just focus on yourself. I said, well, isn't that guy protecting his family? The reason why his son got caught up that way is because of the open air drug trading policies that these Democrats have allowed in New York State. So, I don't want to hear shit about having to just protect your family. It's bullshit. So that's the state of New York. Hundreds and thousands of cases like that. I gotta get running. I gotta get on a No to NATO rally right now.
Yeah, that's all right, man. Not a problem. It's been an absolute pleasure. So cool to get to talk to you. And like keep up the good work with,
no problem, brother.
Crashing parties.
Let's stay in contact, okay?
Yeah, definitely, man. And yeah, so I'll stick your Twitter links for that channel, Due Distance, in the description for everyone. And yeah, man, thanks very much.
No problem, man. I'll see you.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for making it right the way to the end of the podcast. I love that you tuned in this long. Do me a favor, hit subscribe, because 80% of you bastards are not subscribing, but you're watching my videos. See you next time.